We'll now look at the floor of the skull and discuss the features of the floor and the different foramina. First, the floor of the skull is divided into three different segments: the anterior, middle, and posterior cranial fossa. The anterior cranial fossa is what houses the ethmoid bone, and the ethmoid bone is what houses the cribriform plate. The cribriform plate ends up being an area of which the first cranial nerve goes through, olfactory, to provide the sense of smell. In the middle of the cribriform plate, you have a projection of bone that extends superiorly, known as the crista galli. As you begin to move backwards, we'll see on the sphenoid bone the anterior clinoid processes. Show you them again. Anterior clinoid processes. On medial to the anterior clinoid process, you'll see a foramen here, which is for the optic nerve. This is the optic canal. Inferior to the optic canal, and a little laterally, you'll find the superior orbital fissure. Still in the sphenoid bone, we'll see the foramen rotundum, foramen ovale, and foramen spinosum. Medially to foramen ovale and foramen spinosum, you'll see foramen lacerum, which is covered by cartilage in you and I. In the midline, you'll see the depression for the pituitary fossa. As I turn this to show you the depression made here for the pituitary fossa, this is the hypophyseal fossa, or the pituitary fossa, and the back of it is this projection of bone, which is the dorsum sellae. Together, the dorsum sellae and the pituitary fossa make up the sella turcica. Moving out to the temporal bone, we see the squamous region of the temporal bone and the petrous region of the temporal bone. Along the superior ridge of the petrous portion of the temporal bone, you'll see a slight depression. An impression made there is called the trigeminal impression, which is responsible for housing the trigeminal ganglion. Posterior to the petrous portion of the temporal bone, you'll have the internal auditory meatus. Then slightly posterior and inferior to that, this large foramen is the jugular foramen. Now that we're into the posterior cranial fossa, moving medially, we'll see the large foramen magnum. And just laterally to the foramen magnum, we have the hypoglossal canal. Hypoglossal canal.